This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Really appreciate you waking up early with us, Mike. I want to start with the Razorback, Drew Sanders. A lot of Hog fans are hoping he's drafted in the first round tonight. 5-star out of Denton, Texas, starts his career at Alabama, ends up in Fayetteville, played tight end, linebacker, quarterback in high school, and then we've seen him evolve into an outstanding all-SEC, all-American type of linebacker. Where do you fall on him when it comes to his NFL projections?
I've got him number 2 at linebacker. Trenton Simpson, barely number 1 at Clemson, so it's kind of 1A, 1B. He could sneak into the first round. It depends on team needs. There's not a huge need in this draft at linebacker. Most teams have other needs to fill, so he's likely to fall into round 2, but, you could see a team, trade up into late round 1 or somebody with a late pick. I looked at some of the teams with, higher first-round picks or mid-first-round picks that are going to fill a need at a different position and maybe trade back into the late first round if he's available. So maybe Steelers, Raiders, Seahawks, somebody like that who need linebackers. But more likely, he's probably going to be a round 2 value.
Mike, again, one of the things that you have the benefit of is paying attention to a lot of these young men since their high school days. What is a guy that you remember watching and studying in high school that has really elevated himself to a point that he could get drafted tonight that was maybe undervalued coming out of high school?
There's some first-round guys that are intriguing in that respect. I mean, most of them, the Bryce Youngs and C.J. Strouds of the world and the ones with Will Anderson and Jalen Carters, those were all 4-star kids, 5-star kids. You see some of the guys at corner. Christian Gonzalez is going to go in the top 10 from Oregon. Devin Witherspoon is going to go in the top 10 out of Illinois. Those guys, were tall, athletic kids, but kind of raw coming out of high school and really refine their games. And then you get a guy like Zay Flowers, who could be the first pick in the draft. First wide receiver pick in the draft. And, he's a kid who was overlooked, came from a hotbed of talent in the Southeast, didn't get any of the big offers he wanted. BC takes a chance on him. He doesn't play with great quarterbacks, but he continues to sort of develop his game as a, yards after catch guy, runner, and really emerges as a first rounder. So, when you look at recruiting rankings, it's more likely than not the first round is going to be filled with 5 and 4 stars. As I'm flipping through all the mocks and the kids that I see, being in the first round, most of them are 4 or 5. It's those guys that, sneak through, like the ones I mentioned, that really intrigued me because what happened? Why weren't they recruited heavily? What were we missing? And you're always going to have guys like that just work harder than you expect them to and find the right fit.
Yeah, I want to take a sidebar from the draft for a second, since you cover recruiting on a national level, and talk to a lot of these 4- and 5-star guys as they're making their decisions on colleges. How have you seen, now that we've had a couple of years to really digest NIL, how have you seen that change the conversation and maybe change the objective with these players, their families, as they make their decisions on what college they'll go to?
So when we talk to the media, NIL isn't really mentioned that much. They don't, that's not the first thing they say. They say, I'm picking the school, 4-year decision, 4-year school. I'm going to this place because I like the coaches, I like the atmosphere and all that stuff. But when they're in the meetings with the coaches themselves, NIL comes up immediately for most. It hasn't had a massive impact yet. You've seen some classes, Texas A&M's number 1 class a couple of years ago. Everybody talks about that was NIL driven. Miami this past year, the Jaden Rashada, the quarterback from California, all that stuff with, $1 million offers and things like that. Those are few and far between, but it's starting to get more commonplace where if you're going to recruit a player who's a good player, and not just an elite player, but a 4-star kid, you better have some sort of NIL system in place. You don't have to have a deal form. You can't say, listen, come here and we've got these deals all set for you. That's for the USCs and Ohio States and, Texas of the world. But you have to have, a plan. And if you don't have one, you're going to fall behind in recruiting.
It's almost like you got to have a second scholarship, so to speak. You got NIL scholarships, if you will, for so many that you're going to sign in your class for those 4- and 5-star guys.
Yeah, because the scholarship itself used to be like, come here, you get a free scholarship, you get free this and that. And now it's more. And, the kids deserve more. There's no argument against it. It's just to what level? Are you going to really upset your entire locker room by giving? I know one school, and I'm not going to name the school, but they took multiple defensive linemen last year in the 2023 class. Each one of them was promised the best NIL deal, including their own roster. So you had defensive linemen coming in there being promised, the best opportunity for NIL. They get in the room with the other recruits and who are in the room with the current defensive linemen. They all exchange this story, and they all realize they're all being told the same thing, and not all of them can get the best deal, and it leads to real problems. So you have to manage your roster as well, because kids will jump in the portal in a second. If you bring in a corner and promise him more than the corner you've got on your team as a starter, something's going to happen.
Well, Jimbo's going to Jimbo. That's all I can say. So.
It wasn't him. It wasn't him, believe it or not.
Well, that was my first guess.
Just hope it was. We're talking with Mike Farrell. We're talking a little recruiting, NFL, college football as well. Mike, the Arkansas Razorbacks at this point in time are on their highest rated recruiting streak ever. Now, there's still a long way to go between now and then. What have you heard from a national standpoint, some of the more high-caliber players or coaches that you've talked to on what's going on in Fayetteville and recruiting right now?
They obviously – this could have gone very poorly for Sam Pittman, and it didn't. And if you survive – because I mentioned, the horrible scheduling that they had to deal with, in the COVID year – him being hired as a guy who didn't even have coordinator experience, coming off arguably the worst coach in their history. Everything was set up for failure and a disaster. And they overcame it. They thrived. They took a little step back last year. But kids are starting to notice, and they look at the wins and losses. They look at the competitive nature of the team. And that, when you talk about Pittman as a coach, and the pitch he sells as a everyman, I'm one of you guys, it really fits. It's not Dabo Swinney with the religious take, but it's that kind of come here and be a family. And Pittman's no nonsense. If you don't buy into that, you're going to end up in the portal. Mm-hmm. He's not afraid to bring kids into the portal. But I think it's the family approach. It's the community approach. It's the us versus them approach that really helps in recruiting. They're never going to out-recruit Alabama or LSU or any of these, Georgia major programs in the SEC. So what they have to do is they have to be in that second tier, and they have to be very effective in that second tier. And it's working, and it's more competitive in their landscape than ever before, because now you've got Texas going to the SEC, you got Texas A&M in the SEC, you got TCU better. Oklahoma's going to the SEC. LSU's obviously an elite recruiting program. It's harder than ever, and he's doing a great job. So I think that's the pitch to me when you talk to kids. It's like, I really like what they're building at Arkansas from a player family perspective.
You mentioned the portal. Deion Sanders, I know his name has been intertwined with that the last couple days. And I know after the spring game, you said Colorado was a winner. This is crazy what's going on in Boulder. And there were expectations the portal was going to be rampant with Buffalo players, but I don't know to this extent. What do you think about the Buffs heading into year one? And what does that timeline look like for Deion Sanders in Boulder, Colorado?
Well, a winner, and only because people are paying attention to them. That's the win. I think last year they had like 2,000 people at their spring game. They got 47,000 now. They're on national television. People talk about it. We're on a radio show in Arkansas talking about Colorado. That's the win, because they were irrelevant before as a 1-11 football team. Now they're relevant in the discussion. As far as long-term prognosis, if he stays there 5 to 7 years, they'll be successful. That doesn't mean he's a great coach. Doesn't mean the approach he's taking is the proper approach. But with his name, talent will follow. But it's going to take a while to build up that talent and be successful. If he stays for a couple of years and goes to a different job, and he's a very marketable person, so I don't care what his record is. There's going to be Power 5 programs out there and NFL programs interested in him. Then they're in big trouble. Because, if you go this portal route, if you purge your roster of 75% and you go all in on the portal and, it hurts, obviously, your high school recruiting. Short term, you're going to be in trouble. I think they win 4 games, 3 games at most next season. The schedule's not great for them. They're not a good team. Year after that, you hope to go 5-7 or 6-6. And then if you continue, you're going to be okay. But if he goes 4-8, 5-7, and bolts, they're going to be worse off than when he got there.
Yeah. Why does he resonate with today's kids so well? Today's athlete that's coming out. I mean, he's really the guy that this kid's parents would remember more. But clearly, there is a connection between the 16, 17-year-old kid today. What is it? YouTube? What is it that makes Prime so relevant with today's athlete?
Well, there's certain guys. You can talk about legendary players at schools that are, I don't know, impressive. But Deion's legendary player on a legendary scale. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. He's considered the best cornerback to ever live by many people. He's considered to be the best athlete, him and Bo Jackson, I guess, to ever play college football. I look at it you can have a guy as your coach who was really good as a player, but didn't reach that scale. And then you can have Deion. He's generationally, he's never going to fade. These kids weren't born when he was doing his thing, and it doesn't matter because he's Deion Sanders. He's one of the top, I guess you could say, talent-wise is a different discussion, but you could say he's probably one of the most top 10 most famous NFL players ever. And that's just going to bring kids. I mean, if Jerry Rice became a coach, I think you'd see the same thing. He's not the same flashy personality, but everybody knows who he is. He's, the GOAT at his position, and everybody wants to play for him. And I think that's just and his personality obviously plays a part in this as well. So if you get Deion, the great Hall of Famer, who's also affable, funny, he's just the perfect storm. And Colorado's not the place for him. If he was in the SEC, if Mike Norvell weren't successful last year and they hired him at Florida State, the recruiting would be unlike we've ever seen, including Bobby Bowden. It's just whether he can manage a roster or not, I wonder, and whether he can coach on game days. But his legend is just never going to stop.
Mike, last thing before we let you go. I'm a Packers fan. We got plenty of Dallas Cowboy and Kansas City Chiefs fans listening, other fans of the Morning Rush. Do you have an NFL team heading into tonight's draft?
Yeah, it's been the Cowboys forever, but they've been awful. I was a Cowboys fan growing up in the 70s. You were either, where I lived, you were either a Cowboys or Steelers fan, and that's how it was everywhere. So, I gravitated towards the Cowboys. They were good. Then they became great in the early 90s. They've been horrible ever since. But it's the Cowboys, and I'm hoping they get Bijan Robinson. I don't think he's going to fall to them. And that's kind of like a typical fan, dumb pick. I want the running back. But I don't know. I mean, they have needs. I would like to see him fall there. He's not going to fall that far. I'm interested to see what Green Bay does. I think they're going to take a tight end. I think they're going to really get a value out of this Aaron Rodgers trade over the draft the next couple of years. But yeah, Cowboys for me, they don't have the quarterback to win. I'd like to see them get Bijan though, because he's a really nice kid, and I think he would do well in Texas. Obviously he's a budding legend there.
Him and Pollard would be a fun young running back combo to watch in the upcoming years. Mike, we really appreciate your time this morning. Again, you've got so much experience on the recruiting landscape, and you've watched a lot of these guys grow up to a certain degree, and we appreciate you making some time for us this morning on draft day.
Sure thing.
BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right down to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV. BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.